Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so honored to have with us today Mathy Stanislaus. He's the Assistant Administrator for the Office of Solid Waste and Emergency Response at the Federal EPA, the EPA of the United States of America. Welcome to Green is Good, Mathy.
Thank you. I'm glad to be participating.
Hey, and we're going to be talking today about all the important work you're doing at the National Strategy for Electronic Stewardship and the Sustainable Materials Management program that you've put together. But before we get talking about that, I want you to talk about Mathy Stanislaus. Share with our listeners your fascinating journey leading up to this important role that you have as Assistant Administrator at the EPA.
Sure, and I'm hopeful that everyone feels it's fascinating. So I've actually spent most of my career in looking at the issues of solid waste production. One from the perspective of mismanagement of solid waste and the impacts to local communities from the high volume of solid waste. And which is most acutely faced by low-income communities around the country. Also, my first degree was in chemical engineering, and I also have recognized that there's some lost opportunities in not re-engineering and recycling very productive materials that currently go into landfill. So I'm able to take those experiences, one, the opportunity of recovering materials and reconverting that for productive uses, but also lessening the community and environmental impact to provide both environmental benefit to society and economic benefit to society.
You're a lawyer, you're a chemical engineer, so you're able to take all of that formal education and then apply it to the critical topic, like you say, of solid waste management or potentially mismanagement and help get it back on track again. For all our listeners out there that want to follow along as we talk about these important topics with Mathy Stanislaus, please go to www.epa.gov. There's tons of information there on all the great and important work that Mathy and all his colleagues at the EPA are doing on a regular basis to make not only the United States, but the world a better, cleaner, and more enjoyable and healthier place to live in. And we thank you for that, Mathy. I wanted today focus the conversation, because the EPA is such a large organization, on the National Strategy for Electronic Stewardship and Sustainable Materials Management. Can you talk about the impetus for its creation, the National Strategy for Electronic Stewardship?
Yeah, I will say the impetus of the national strategy is part of the broader impetus on sustainable materials management, is to really change the paradigm from purely end-of-life waste management to look at every part of the life cycle, look at how we can design to recover materials post-use, and put it back into the economic stream. Clearly, electronics, being the huge volume that it is, calls out for more concerted strategy among the federal government and the federal government working with the private sector. And just to give you some stats, which I found tremendously compelling, we estimate that 438 million electronics were sold in 2009, which is double from what was sold in 1997. In 2013, the average U.S. household has 28 distinct devices, according to Consumer Electronics Association annual survey. In 2011, we estimate that 3.4 million tons of selected consumer electronics were generated. Of this, 850,000 tons were collectible recycling, which is roughly a recycling rate of about 25%. We've now increased that to 29.2 for electronics. Still, we have more room to grow. Every million cell phones recycled, we can recover 35,000 pounds of copper, 772 pounds of silver, 75 pounds of gold, 33 pounds of palladium. So what this means is we're recovering really precious, really valuable materials, and we don't have to impact the environment and the public health from extracting this from mining for these materials.
And the trend of urban mining, as you just pointed out with those wow statistics on how much metals can be pulled out of every million cell phones, the trend of urban mining is growing and is something we should all encourage and foster.
Well, that's exactly right. There is obviously an environmental benefit for doing that. There is an economic benefit from doing that. There's also a local community benefit from doing that, because this creates jobs locally in many places where those jobs are critically necessary.
Are the NSES's goals focused just on government initiatives, or are there other stakeholders involved and there's other goals also?
We have 4 goals under the National Strategy for Electronic Stewardship. One is to build incentives for the design of greener electronics and enhancing the science, research, and technology development in the United States. 2, ensure that the federal government leads by example. 3, increase the safe and effective management and handling of used electronics in the United States. And 4, reduce harm from U.S. exports of e-waste and improving safe handling of used electronics in developing countries. We also identify that EPA has a tremendous role, to some cases being a convener, in other cases to developing tools. One tool is referred to as EP, which is the Electronics Product Environmental Assessment Tool, which is essentially developed to enable the design, green design of electronics, but also to enable consumers to identify those electronics equipment that best are able to build green in a real tangible way into their design. And folks could look at www.epeat.net to find out more about this very important tool.
You know, what are some of the wins and successes that the national strategy has gotten already to date, and where do you want to take it in the future? Where can you improve the program and continue to drive more successes in the future?
Our recycling rate of electronics has jumped from about 25% to close to 30%. So we've made some headway, but clearly more to go. So the federal government is a tremendously large consumer, one of the largest consumer of electronics. We are projected to spend $73 billion on IT or electronic goods and services in 2013. So we not only want to lead by example, but lead by a pocketbook to drive better behavior. So one of the things we've done is to push the safe recycling using third-party certified recycling programs. So by our push for third-party recycling programs, we have seen the number of certified recyclers increase about over 560, which is a 360% increase from when we began measuring that in 2011. We have certified recyclers in 44 states and 15 countries. We also continue to develop more rigor in these standards. So this directly translates to the protection of public health, because then we don't have mismanagement both in this country and elsewhere, as well as the economic value of benefiting. What is next is we continue to want to take the next step forward. On the recycling standards and certification, we want to continue to improve that. Clearly, we want to continue to enhance and expand our partnership with industry, because clearly industry is a major driver for implementing a life cycle-based approach, adding even more rigor to the design for recovery of materials, tracking and recovering materials, and continue to push the safe management of recycling. We continue to want to collaborate a worldwide network of governments and non-governmental organizations and businesses, and continue to want to work with states and local governments who are really very much in the front lines of helping the U.S. government to help manage the infrastructure for the collection and oversight of electronic materials.
For our listeners who just joined us, we're honored to have with us today Mathy Stanislaus. He's the Assistant Administrator of Office of Solid Waste and Emergency Response at the U.S. EPA. You can learn more about all the great work he's doing with his colleagues at www.epa.gov. Mathy, let's get to one of the tougher issues that your organization faces and the United States faces right now, the issues of cathode ray tubes, CRTs, and glass recycling. What's the current situation with regards to recycling CRTs in the United States?
Sure. Let me begin with, why do we have such a challenge? And it's simply because of the TVs that we're currently watching. The TVs we currently watch are flat panel technology, and so the demand for CRT technology has dropped off dramatically because of the major shift to different kind of screens. These CRT or cathode ray tubes contains significant amount of lead. About every CRT generally contains about 4 pounds of lead. So there's some ability for reclaiming lead through what's called lead smelting operations, which is to reclaim lead and for reusing it in car batteries. One limitation is that these operations, these lead smelting operations, can only accept a limited quantity of CRT glass in their process. So this has constricted the, what we call the end market or the recycling market of CRT. So we just raised concerns about how can we work with industry to figure out how we can best promote the recycling. But let me first begin with some of the potential risk of mismanagement. It begins with lead. Lead is a developmental disabling contaminant, particularly acute to children if it's mismanaged. So one of the challenges is that the collection and stockpiling of these CRTs, which if left unmanaged, would mean that the lead could leach into the ground. There's a risk of fire, and so generally, folks, workers as well as residents adjacent to that are at risk from the exposure of lead.
Gotcha.
So we want, and this is illegal to collect it in this way, mismanage them in this way. So we want to make sure that it is not mismanaged and causing the public health risk. We also are engaging to how we can best advance the recycling. We continue to work with the various participants, and there are some innovative companies who are looking at the recycling markets. We've engaged some of them to find out what they have learned and see how it can be replicated elsewhere in this country, see how we can promote those best practices to enhance the recycling of it. I mean, we continue going to be challenged by this because the economic drivers are not as great as in some other recycling markets, but we do believe that we can grow the recycling of it while also making sure that while it's collected, it is not collected and mismanaged, where it creates risk for the public.
And another hot topic that's has been in the news since 2009 was the 60-minute special on the shipping of our U.S. unwanted electronics into developing countries that really aren't equipped to manage the appropriate recycling of them. They burn the plastics off of them. They do acid wash baths to get to the precious metals. Can you talk a little bit about the EPA efforts to ensure that either electronics are being responsibly recycled domestically, or if they do get shipped abroad, that they're being recycled safely in other countries?
I would characterize the e-waste problem as both a export problem, but also a problem even in the developing world of electronics that are used in those countries, and then try to manage the reuse or recycling. So we're doing a number of things to address the safety of the recycling of these materials. And I mentioned the CRT issue. We're finalizing a rule to better track the exports of CRTs for reuse and recycling, so that both we and the importing country has full knowledge of the import, so that there's less sham operations, and when it's imported to another country, it gets properly managed and properly recycled. EPA has supported and recognizes two e-waste certification standards: responsible recycling and e-stewards recycling. We are supporting both standards as a floor for safe recycling of e-waste materials. We want to continue to make sure it's implemented in a safe and rigorous way, and continue to want to increase the floor to add more rigor to the recycling. Next, United States participates in what's called the Basel Convention's Expert Working Group on Environmental Sound Management, which is through that we are developing guidance for countries for the environmental sound management of waste, including some electronic waste. The U.S. government has also contributed to the development of the Partnership for Action on Computing Equipment, which is developing guidelines for the management of used electronics or recycling, repair, and refurbishment. And the last thing I could mention, and I just came from Mexico City meeting with my partners in the Mexico equivalent of the EPA to address, in part, this issue. There's an organization called the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, which is composed of U.S., Mexico, and Canada. And through that, we're building capacity for environmental sound management of e-waste throughout North America. And this includes the development of training modules for the environmental sound management of used electronics and e-waste.
Wow. You guys are doing so much. We're down to the last minute or so. I'm going to give you the last word on what the future holds for all the great work you're doing at the EPA with regards to the electronics and appropriate management of the solid waste issue of appropriate electronic recycling.
What the future holds is really bring greater visibility to the economic and environmental benefit and potential of recycling. Nationally we have a recycling rate of about 35%. So, for example, I just participated in an event in the Southeast which really focused on the manufacturing benefits of materials recovery. To throw out one number for you, a 10% increase in the national recycling rate, we can recover 24 million tons, which translates to a value of $2.6 billion. And
wow. So we got to recycle more, and that's in the future.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, Mathy, we're going to have you back on. Mathy Stanislaus, thank you so much. And we're going to continue to talk about all the great work the EPA is doing. Please go to www.epa.gov. Thank you, Mathy, for being an inspiring environmental leader and making the world a better place. You are truly living proof that green is good.